Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Follow the Contract. As an enterprise-level security systems technician, I was put on an on-call rotation. The contract with the city is we don't pay for travel time, only time on site, in increments of 15 minutes. My company pays me a minimum of 3 hours, no matter what. It's Thursday of the first spring long weekend. It's 5 PM and I'm just about to leave the office. We got a call from the city for our water treatment plant way out on the most eastern part of the city. On a normal day, this drive is 1.5 hours. On a long weekend, it's over 2. Our truck leaving the plant clipped the gate card reader and the lights apparently won't turn on anymore. We need you to fix it. I asked the client, have you had a mobile guard dispatched to test the unit? It's a long drive on a long weekend for something that may be able to wait until Monday or not even be an issue. Sorry, he left for the long weekend and guards are busy at another site. The contract says you gotta attend today. Sorry dude. After 2.5 hours in brutal traffic, I get to the site, check in with the dispatch and find that no one has tried to get into this gate for over 24 hours. Not one person has even tried to use the gate, because it's an exit gate. The only time it's used for entry is when the other gate is down or when a full-size trailer needs access to the site, which only happens once a month for chemical deliveries. This gate is not important for a long weekend emergency service and could have waited for Monday 9 AM when the guy who lives down the street could have attended. But as I was already there, it was time for some malicious compliance. The manufacturer's recommendation requires me to follow multiple steps to replace faulty devices. There are a lot of things I can normally bypass to save time, but the contract terms and conditions with the city requires that I follow all appropriate steps to prevent damage to the controller. I need access to the main controller, and the city guards have that, so I can start the repair process. The guards won't be there for 35 minutes. They have to pay me while I do payroll and go grab a coffee. With the guard on site, I follow each letter of the best practice guidance with meticulous detail and patience. Oh shoot! The backboard on the pedestal needs some repair and modification, as the previous integrator installed the old reader poorly. But the contract requires me to make it right, so off to Home Depot I go. With the new reader installed, I have to make sure the wiring at the head end is correct. I check and it's not. Gotta fix that. And I don't have spare wire to do so off to another location 15 minutes away to grab some wire. Now the wiring is all done. The reader powered on. Time to test and commission using convoluted testing sheets and dispatch to ensure proper functionality. It's now 9:30 PM. I charged the client for a new reader, new wiring, proper backplate assembly and my time to wait for the guard to bring keys and observe contract terms and conditions. I could have just swiped my card on the reader and left, but I'd rather the company make up for my travel time and labor. I can't remember how much the final bill was. I wanna say something like $1,000, but thanks to my notes on the work done, the city paid in full. The next story is called I Will Turn You In. My brother Stan was a factory representative whose job was to set up dealerships to sell mobile homes. He was on the road a lot and made good bucks. He was the bad boy of the family and a player. He was married to a wonderful woman that the whole family loved. Unfortunately, he met a woman on the road and he did end up filing for divorce. It was not a friendly divorce. His soon-to-be ex-wife's attorney called him up and indicated that he was asking for alimony at all, based on his income that year, approximately $350,000. My brother patiently explained the ebb and flow of sales and attempted to compromise on a 5-year average to include years where he made only $150,000. The attorney continued that he knew Stan had cheated on his taxes. My brother interrupted and asked how he had cheated. The attorney told him that when my brother wrote off his considerable business expenses, he knew that he was reimbursed under the table by his employer, and that this information might find its way to the IRS unless he accepted his demands. Stan said, "So, you will turn me into the IRS if I don't agree?" Yes was the answer. Stan said he would see him in court and hung up. My brother then contacted a tax attorney and brought in 5 years of records. A week later he picked up the results and found that he owed a little over $100,000. He then drove over to the local IRS office and indicated to a rather puzzled employee that he wanted to turn himself in for cheating on his taxes. After going through the tax attorney's findings, he asked what my brother wanted to do. Stan said he wanted to pay it, along with any penalties due. After a while, day or two, he was called in and told the full amount was north of $100,000. Fine, said Stan, and wrote a check for exactly half of it. Then, pointing at the 1040 form, said to get the other half from the person that consigned this document. His soon-to-be ex-wife had to cash out her retirement, but the divorce proceeding went much better for my brother without the IRS leverage her attorney thought he had. The third story is called Horrible Leadership. A couple of years back, I was working as a fundraiser on a political campaign. At the time, it was just me and the campaign manager. We will call him Brian. I had been hired as deputy director for their finance team, the number 2. It took months before Brian was able to hire a main fundraiser for the team. During that time, I had been running the entire fundraising program by myself. While there were bumps along the road, we were quite successful and exceeding our goals. Despite this, Brian would constantly remind me of my inexperience. He claimed I couldn't have good instincts because I didn't have enough years in the game. Political fundraising is a high-stress job, especially at the end of the quarter, before you have to report how much your campaign has raised. The day before the end of the quarter is a crunch to raise as much money as possible. I'd suggested that I would use that time to call previous donors to ask if they would consider matching their donations from the last election cycle. Brian responded to my suggestion with a sarcastic, "Obviously that is what we are going to do." He prints a list of previous donors with donation amounts and told me to start from the beginning and work my way through the list. But here's the thing, Brian printed the list in alphabetical order. I told him I was going to reprint the list in order of highest to lowest dollar amount. This way we could maximize getting more money in a short amount of time. There were many names on the list that had donated between $250 and $500, but for whatever reason the first 50 plus people had donated more like 1 to 50. Brian hated when I made suggestions after he had done all the work to set something up. I explained it would only take me a few minutes to reorganize the list in Excel, and/or I'd be happy to call out of order to larger donors first. Brian explained he was the boss. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was to call the list the way he suggested. I clarified that he wanted me to call these people. In alphabetical order? Yes? Alrighty then. I started making calls. I called well over 100 people that day, mostly voicemails, and out of the people who did donate, no one's donation had exceeded over $100. At the end of the day, Brian checked in and saw I raised a whopping $340. We could have easily raised 3 to 5k had we prioritized differently. He was mad. When he asked why I hadn't called this or that $500 donor, I explained that I was following his specific orders. He yelled at me, claiming that a good fundraiser would have ignored his orders and done what was best for the team. After a week of blaming me for sabotaging the campaign on purpose, remember we had already exceeded our goal, I quit and got a better job. When they eventually hired a finance director, she quit a month into the job. The campaign died out shortly after, no doubt because of Brian's horrible leadership. The last story is called 22 Seconds. This happened several years ago. My former employer uses a points-based system to track attendance. The parts of the policy relevant to the story are: tardy would call in prior to the start of shift, a half point. Tardy with no call, 1 point. Accumulate enough points and you are fired. There's a set of train tracks crossing the street that leads to this facility. Occasionally, trains will stop while blocking this crossing. If you are caught there in the last few minutes before you are supposed to clock in, you have a decision to make. Wait or go around. Either way, you might be late. Sometimes you'll decide to go around and then the train clears the crossing and the folks who waited get in before you. Sometimes you'll wait and watch through the gaps in the train cars as folks who went around pull into the parking lot while you are still idling at the blocked train crossing. To be clear, going around involves taking a lot of secondary county roads as well as a few field access roads. It's an extremely rural area, so you literally never know what kind of road conditions you're going to find along the way around. One night during my years on third shift, I was stopped at these tracks and decided to wait. Eventually, the train moved on. I raced into the parking lot, used my keycard to sit through the turnstiles and ran to the punch clock. My clock-in time was 10:30 p.m. They have these biometric punch clocks that read your fingerprint to clock employees in and out. Sometimes these clocks just will not read your fingerprint. I got to the punch clock and it said 10:30. I'm golden. It doesn't track seconds. I entered my employee ID number and placed my finger on the sensor. 3 beeps. Failed read. Tried again. 3 beeps. Tried once more. 3 beeps. Nope, not trying again, because by this time the clock was likely to tick over to 10:31 in the middle of reading my finger. When I got to my assigned work area, I told my team manager what happened. He said don't worry about it, he'd manually punch me in. I should have listened, but I'm a worrier. In the morning, when the front office people started showing back up, I went to the attendance office to confirm that my situation was all good. The office administrator decided to check my gate time and used that as the determining factor. I scanned my keycard at 10:30:22 p.m. That's so tardy, no call. 1 full attendance point is to be issued. I reiterated that it was a train stopped on the tracks, completely beyond my control. She advised me to either leave earlier and just wait for half an hour for my shift to start on the majority of days, or else get a cell phone. I didn't have one at all back then to call in from the road next time. Well, what I did instead was start calling in absent, just in case something comes up after I leave home but before I arrive at work, in the evenings before leaving for work. The first few days the attendance officer up front was just bemused. After weeks they became annoyed. After months they'd apparently complained enough and I finally got told to stop. During this conversation they revealed that calling in too early before the start of your shift made it extra challenging to make sure the notice gets to the right members of management. The message is no longer flagged as new by the time they are creating logs for the next shift. This was great news for me. From then on, every morning before leaving the premises at the end of my shift, I use one of their phones to call in absent for my next shift that evening. They tried to write me up for insubordination, but the labor union slapped it down. The collective bargaining agreement specifies the time we must call in by, but does not specify a time before which call-ins may not be made. Cue the huge grin across my face. I never forgot that my team manager tried to do me a solid though. If I was actually going to be late or absent for some reason, I would call the TM's desk line directly to let them know. Even long after I finally got a cell phone, I continued doing this. I just call in on my way home instead of sticking around to use their phones after my shift. Found out years and years later from some union reps that upper management never got over this. It drove them nuts that they got beat at their own game by something so simple. It didn't bring the walls crumbling down, but it was a persistent, enduring source of frustration and impotence for them. And really, knowing you can manage all of that with just a 22-second phone call a day, that's the kind of thing that gets you out of bed in the evening. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories in today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and would like to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. And if you want to support me even further, why don't you check out the channel membership? I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.